Let's get into drums. This is going to be fun. I've got an impact here. So remember, impact is what we use for our drums. So how you're going to get that is by going to Browse, Instruments, Presonus, and Impact. I just drag this impact straight into my session here. You can do the same after this video. And I'll open it up. And what I've got loaded is a pop rock kit here, just as a basic example. So up here, it'll probably say default when you open it, and you get all these presets that come with it. These are things you can just click on that come with all sorts of drum sounds loaded into it already, and you can experiment with them. So I've got one loaded here, and let's just talk about the very, very basics of it first. So each of these little pads has a sound loaded into it. These are mapped to my keyboard that I can play with. And then each sound has some controls over here that you can manipulate that with as well. So that's really what's going on here in essence. So let's talk about the basics then of a drum kit. Just to review, we did talk about this a while ago, but it's good to refresh because we're going to be making drum beats now. So the most important elements are your kick drum, which is the low sound. So in this case, that's attached to my C key. You can see the note name down here, C1. And then we've got a snare drum on the D key, which is the cut, cut, cut sound. And then we've got a hi-hat, which I've got set here and here. These are two different variations of the hi-hat. And we've got an open hi-hat, because a hi-hat can actually be closed or open. This is a fundamental characteristic of a hi-hat. It's like two little cymbals stuck together, and it can be hit when it's closed, or a pedal can be released and it will open, and it will kind of vibrate back and forth, and you get this sound versus this. That's a better example. Those are the very main elements. Kick drum, the low thing, snare drum, the cracky thing, and the hi-hat, which is a sound. There's some other things in here as well, cymbals and toms, and we're going to talk about that as we go. But for now, we just need to know about these three main things. Now, generally speaking, the way a drum beat works is that you have some element that is counting time. And that could be, in our case, it's going to be the hi-hat. And that hi-hat is counting time either in quarter notes. So if our beat is 1, 2, 3, 4, eighth notes, 16. It's constant though. That's the point. In standard drum beats, there's some element that is constant that is counting time for the rest of the kit to kind of go around. Then the snare drum is going to be hitting on beats 2 and 4. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then the kick drum, really its main thing is it's going to hit on 1. And in a standard rock beat, it hits on 3 as well. So rock beat is just the name for this most simple drum beat that we're going to check out right now. I'm going to record that using my keyboard. So I just recorded 1 bar of that, and let's go take a look at it. I'm just going to quantize it quickly just so we can have simplicity when we're talking about it. And I'll shorten my loop to have just the 1 bar. So if we listen to this, so let's dissect what's happening here. Here I've got my hi-hat playing eighth notes. If I change my grid to eighth, you can see ta, 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 like that, right? Listen to that again. And on the last eighth note, I'm playing the open hi-hat, which kind of opens the sound for a second, and then it closes back down again when we get to the beginning of the beat, beginning of the bar. Then my snare drums are on 2 and 4. And my kick drums are on 1 and 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 3. This is the essence of a basic rock beat. Something is keeping time, that's the hi-hat in this case, the snares are on 2s and 4s, and then the kicks are on 1 and 3. Now, where we have the most freedom usually is with the kick drum, and the kick drum doesn't have to play these kind of simple patterns. It can have some more interesting things. So can the snare drum, so can the hi-hat. But it's good at first just to experiment with the kick drum and slowly work your way out to changing all the other elements. So for example, if I put my kick drum here instead, or how about here? Or how about both? And then how about here as well? Not enough? How about 16th notes? Now we get a whole bunch of more places that we can put our things. So we could do 2 here maybe, and then 1 here. Don't like this one, let's put him here instead. Put this here. This one here. So long as I've got a kick drum hitting on 1, I can put other ones anywhere else I want, and experimenting with the grid, trying them in different spots is going to reveal to you a lot of cool patterns, and you'll start to recognize patterns that you've heard in music before, because a lot of drum beats get reused all the time because they sound great, so there's no need to change them. However, you can find your own variations just by changing your grid size and then moving the hits around. You find some interesting patterns. So when you're playing around with this, my suggestion is, for now, always keep a kick on 1, keep some hi-hat or other element going either on quarter notes or 8th notes or 16th notes, whatever you feel is best, and the snares on 2 and 4, and start moving all the other kick drums around. You can have a pattern that's twice as long as this. For instance, if I duplicated this, and then I can hold Shift, click both, and I push G, and that will merge those sections together. Now I'm going to drag my loop out to encompass them both. And now I've got twice as long pattern here. So if I go, and I can remove this one, and remove this one, and maybe I'll put this down here as a regular hi-hat, not open. So now I've got a pattern that's 2 bars long, 8 beats long, and it's different in this half than it is in this half. Your pattern can be a bar long, 2 bars long, 4 bars long, even 8 bars, 16 bars long, but it's good to make it relatively simple, especially at first, because a very complicated pattern is hard for the listener to comprehend, especially if it's always changing. If it's like 8 bars long and every bar is different, that's quite complicated to understand, especially if you've got other elements playing, doing interesting things too. So sometimes it's great to have a simple beat, especially when we're learning to program beats first, and then we can start to expand out afterwards. Another thing that's good to know is a crash cymbal. So a crash cymbal, let's see if we can find one here. There's one. Usually marks an important point, like the start of a new section or the end of a pattern. So I could put a crash cymbal instead of my hi-hat at the start of my beat, and now we listen. This is a very common thing to do. Beginning a new section or beginning the start of a new pattern with a crash cymbal, because it feels big, it feels like you've got an explosion that happened in that section. So if I'm coming out of my verse into my chorus, I'm going to start my chorus with a crash, or my verse will start with a crash, or even midway through my chorus I'll have another crash, something like that. So crash cymbals, or cymbals in general, these splashy sounds, they're good for accentuating changes or important points in the music. So far we've got an element that's counting, that's the hi-hat. We got the snare that's doing the accents on 2 and 4, kick drum that's hitting in some kind of interesting pattern, and then a crash cymbal, which is accentuating the start of a pattern or the start of a section. A song is going to probably have, for the most part, different drum beats for every section of the song. Your verse will have some kind of drum beat, your chorus will have some kind of drum beat. Even in loop-based songs, you'll probably have different drum beats for different parts of the song. certain genres of music, certain genres of electronic music, for instance, have one drum beat for the whole thing, which is totally fine too, because they're relying on other elements to provide interest instead of the drums. But sometimes it's great to have different drum beats for every part of your song, and you could begin that part with a crash cymbal or some other cymbal to give it a sense of exploding into that section. So just to review, I'm going to delete this impact, and I'm going to come down to Browse. This is what you'll be able to do yourself. So I've got Browse, I find Impact, I drag it in. I come to the top of Impact, and I select where it says Default. This is where I can select my presets, and I'm just going to select whatever kit I want here. I'll just go back to whatever I had there, I think the Pop Rock kit or something. But there's a whole lot to choose from. And then I've now got these sounds, and if I want to start making a beat, I can either play the beat with my fingers on my keyboard, and it's best then to turn on your metronome, which you can do by pushing C or just clicking this button, push play, set up a loop like this, and it will just give you a click, and now you can experiment. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. If you practice, you can actually play beats with just your hands. That's kind of like learning to drum just with your fingers. You don't need to do that. It's fun to do though. If you want to do it just by programming, you can double click when you don't have the crosshair, the plus icon, but you have the mouse cursor. Double click and you'll get an empty MIDI chunk, MIDI event. Double click that and here it is. You can start programming your beats in here, and there's multiple views here. We actually get a drum view as opposed to the keyboard view like this, the piano roll. Both are fine. The drum view shows you the names of the hits you have, and then I could just like say double click and get a sound like this, and then put my hi-hat. It's a pretty disgusting sounding beat, but you get the idea. You can start experimenting like this, and I do recommend that you do that. So change your grid value, try different things out, try different hits. The important things to remember are some element that's counting time. It doesn't have to be a hi-hat. That could be a cymbal, that could be a tom, that could be something else. You can just experiment and find something. Some of the kits in Impact won't have clearly defined hi-hats or something. They'll have different sounds, and you can experiment with that. But you'll want a kick drum on your first beat, snare drum on 2 and 4. Then you can place kick drums wherever you want, and maybe try out using crash cymbals. Just have fun, create like a bar long or 2 bar long pattern, and just move things around. Just experiment what it's like to create drum beats using Impact. In the future, I'm going to give you some pre-made drum beats that you're going to have to copy. So you're going to have to listen to the drums, listen to what they're doing, and then emulate them using Impact. So it's good for now just to practice making drum beats on your own and get familiar with how that works using the grid and everything, because when it comes time to emulating the other drum beats, you're going to want to have some knowledge about how those are created. So have fun with that, experiment, and I'll see you in the next video with some more advanced features of Impact about how to manipulate the sounds in Impact, add your own sounds into Impact, do a whole bunch of cool stuff like that.